conversation had win an award. I am highly for some action survive show. To have been doing it is on him a platform live conversation. See, monitoring the facial in live on our new 19 himself had upon his good consequence from this abuse white people around inside people common dialogue that black and white people were
wonderful. I'm, as you would say, and blessed and highly favored. Thank you very much for having me on here. Louis March, thank you very much for introducing me to this Toronto and national, global celebrity that is Dr. Vibe. I see you on the Good Project. I see you bouncing all over the internet here and in your show on racism and stuff that's happening in the lives of Black people all over. So thank you very much for your work. Thanks for having me on the show.
The shirt, the sweatshirt, also want to oil, Dr. Vibe. The conversation here now. A lot of before before that was like,
and I love what you said about me being a young man. I'm not quite so young, but you know, melanated people, we got it from our mama. I was born here in Toronto area. My mother had some issues, just an amazing woman, Carmen Bailey, from Jamaica, a journalism student from the University of the West Indies, and she wanted to take the world by storm. She loved Jamaica, but felt it was a little bit too patriarchal, so she decided to come to North America and set the world on fire with her pen. And she came here, had some difficulties, and as a result, her 3 children were taken into the Children's Aid, and they were thrown to the wind. One sister out west, another sister out east, and me a little bit north of Toronto. We're talking 1972. So I was brought into an all-white town, into a white group home, and in 1972, on the heels of the civil rights movement, of what's happening in Mexico, Black Power, on the heels of Angela Davis and Fred Hampton, and the death of Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King, I arrived sole, single, Black child in an all-white town. And from there, for the next 15 years of my life, what happened to me was sexual, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, academic, and social abuse. And as a result of that, I went through a lot of things in my life, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. But in order to survive, I recognized, Dr. Vibe, that I had to pay keen attention to the world that was around me, particularly those that had power over me. And that's primarily white people, and focus on some of the things that they did on an ongoing basis to damage my life as a Black person. So I started observing. Before the conversations, there was observations with about white people or with white people.
In order to release.
I can hear you excellent. Can you hear me, Dr. Vibe? Excellent.
What I do because it was my day. You did.
Right. So my mother has told me that my father was Jamaican, or Jamaican heritage. I don't know who he is. I'd love to know who he is. I mean, we've got ancestry.com or one of those that might be able to fill those things out, because my mother's long passed away. And I hear you. I hear you. And so I don't know who my father is. And it's interesting. If I didn't know who my mother was, or I didn't know who my father was, either one of those could be enough to cause an identity issue, where you're struggling with a sense of self. And whoever is a guardian, parent, or caregiver, if you don't have someone in your life that's like you, that shares your heritage and your experiences, then that can be problematic for you as you grow.
Okay. Got it. My education to
Well, my education was education of pain and abuse. So my mother wasn't in my life until I was later on in my teens. Occasionally she would drop back in, but I was primarily a ward of a court in an all-white home. So my education was erasure. What I learned was that Black people had no value. This is what I was taught. That Black people didn't have a history. I was taught that I was worthless, and so that was my education. My education was that white lives and white perspectives were the most important things in the world, and that their stories were the ones that needed to be told. Their perspectives were the ones that were important, right? And so every day it was abuse. I don't know a single person who had a significant role in my life before the age of 14 years old that wasn't abusive to me. So all I knew was constant abuse.
wow. In refugee.
Well, I didn't. It overcame me. It overcame me. So what you had is me doing things like they decided it would be funny at Halloween, that community, to dress me up in a fake plastic skirt, put a little fake bone through my nose, and have me run around, and they would call me spear chucker, and they would all laugh. So I descended into a sunken place where I didn't value myself because I didn't know myself. I didn't recognize until I was 13 years old that I came from a proud people that had a unique history and had accomplished amazing things. In fact, had set all of North America on where we are right now, that built North America and pumped Europe up from the dirge of disease. So I didn't know those things. I wasn't taught those things until something unique that happened when I was 13 years old. See, there you go. So I was a bully child. So I would try to find unique places to hide and unique friends to spend time with. And so one of those unique friends were these books. Whenever you see me someplace, you'll always see a book around me. So when I was in a high school, first couple months of high school, I saw some bullies coming up a hallway, and they saw me and they said, "Oh, there's that N-word, N-word." And I ran into the library because the library tended to be a safe place because there's library attendants and librarians in it. And I had a special aisle that I would go in that was right in line with all the people, the adults that would work there. And so I ran in there and I hid. Now, that was between two aisles of books. So I kept on noticing whenever I'd go and sit in there, because I didn't have any friends, that there was this book, Dr. Vibe, with an X on the bindings. You see it. Right. Right. And I was saying, for the longest time, I used to see it there. You had a green top and a green bottom, and on it just said X. It's one of those printed book covers to protect the spine of the book. And I kept on thinking, I'm not interested in a book that says X on it. What's that about? It's probably just some boring thing about the letter X. I'm a child. I didn't know. So these boys chased me in one day. I ran down the aisle to my hiding space, and I thought, like a child does, maybe if I cover my face, they won't see me. So I reached out and grabbed this book with an X on it, and I hid. And eventually, they didn't show any interest. I think one of the adults in there might have told them to split or something like that. But they were gone, and I had this book, X, in my hand. And here's one of the important decision points that we make in our lives. Do I open this book or not? And I remember sitting there thinking, should I even look at this? And then I decided to open it. And it was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And my goodness, I learned that we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. My goodness, my eyes opened up and I realized that I was a part of a chain of abuse that had lasted for 400 years, and that our history didn't begin at slavery, that we come from a proud, wise, and brilliant people. I realized that this is a system of things that was put in place while I have my personal responsibilities and accountabilities, that this is a part of a system that produces outcomes that damage lives like mine. And my goodness, I wanted to change my name from what it was to ICX. And I walked around and I made a t-shirt and I put an X over it. This is a long time before the movie, 20 years before the movie came out. And I sat in that identity for a period of time. But damage was already done. And so I spent the greater part of my life until the last 10, 15 years coming to a place, getting help that I need, going to see therapists. And Black men, there's nothing wrong with going to see a therapist. I have this amazing doctor. She knows her stuff. Dr. I won't say her name, but she's amazing. She's helped me work through my stuff. I started listening to the voices of Black women. I started reading more about some of the amazing things that culture has done. I started getting involved in the community. I started journaling. I started doing work on myself. And it got me to a place where I was able to lead others. So that's sort of the preamble.
Race. Did you want
right, and so let's remove white people from the picture, because this book is first and foremost for me, because I was sitting at a decision point again where I had got involved with excess abuse with meeting women and career and money and drugs and crime and a whole bunch of other foolishness. And so this isn't just before the book, but it's sometime before the book. I started questioning my feelings on things I saw, because everywhere I looked, I saw racism. I saw racism everywhere. And I would talk to people and they would say, well, there's not racism in everything. And I thought, well, maybe they're right. Maybe there's something going on with me right now. Maybe there's something that's wrong about me, that I see racism every place. But then I looked around and I saw what the great academics, Tuskegee, Carver, Webb Du Bois, Shirley Chisholm, Harriet Tubman, W.E. Du Bois, John Henrik Clark, Joy DeGruy. So I seen what all these amazing academics were saying, but I was trying to find out a place where I could see what people were saying on an ongoing basis, and I couldn't find any. So I said to myself, you know what? Let me start having and documenting conversations with white people. And then what I did is I started having this dialogue, and I recognized that on average, Black people, we really know about the circumstances of our lives. We're an expert on oppression. We've lived it ourselves. We've got oral tradition that's been passed down from our parents and our friends. And you and I talk for 10 minutes and we have unique shared experiences, right, Dr. Vibe? Right? So we've got this cosmos while we're not a monolith, and there's different culture in Black culture, different experiences, different mindsets. One thing is universal, and that's our suffering at the hands of white supremacy, genocide, patriarchy. And so then we started having these conversations, and what we recognize is we know what we're talking about, and we started to have assertive challenge. We had assertive challenge. We told, no, that's white fragility. No. We weren't in. We built civilization, that we built the pyramids and the Sphinx that you knock the nose off of, right? We've got a long history, and we taught Europe how not to sleep with animals or pee or doo-doo in your drinking water. We taught you those things. So it's interesting. We started having those conversations and providing leadership to Black, Indigenous, people of color, and frankly, white people too as well. So we set the narrative here.
Let me just
Sure. Absolutely. It's the best book that I've ever read, other than maybe some articles of faith. It's almost like that point in the Matrix. So, the blue pill, the red pill. No, well, I picked the black pill. And so for me, what it did, it made me understand that I had worth. And then when I understood I had worth, I started seeing you, Dr. Vibe, have worth. I started seeing every single Black person, Black women, as they're having to go through the abuses that they do on a daily basis. I saw that they had worth. And I started seeing worth in everybody and who we are as a people. And then that allowed me to do what I do now, which is I wake up every morning. The first thing I think about is the lives of marginalized people. And it's the last thing I do before I go to sleep, with our network that we created as a result of the questions that I had. So that question was formed by reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. He had his way and his journey, and I recognized that book told me nothing other than you've got to find your own way. And it took me many years to get there, but I've never stopped asking that question. What is my journey? Well, the first person I told was my wife. She said, she's very supportive. She said, yeah. She's a Jamaican woman. So she said, well, all right, I'll write the book then. In her own way. She's very supportive, very gentle person. Write the book and then raise her eyebrow, because she's heard other people say that before. But then what she started seeing is action. I created this online community, hundreds of thousands of people that reach 18 to 20 million people in a year. So she saw that from zero. She saw me transform sort of my life and my thought pattern and my reading and my investment into my community. She saw me do things like the other day. I think she was in the room when I reached out to you. Said, who's that? I said, this is an amazing guy, Dr. Vibe. Don't know what he's doing in this community. It's not just a show, but it's how he's supporting the lives of young Black fathers, how he's a responsible man in this community, that I can learn a lot from him. He's a great example. So she was very, very supportive in writing this.
Interviewed.
Well, that's the thing, because let me be clear about this, that the only way this work could have been done is as a team. And Black women, whether it's Monique Callahan, who may have come on, sorry, Monique Cease, I should say her name, Fatima, Annalicia, Joanna, Oro, all these people are very, Kylie, were all very supportive. Melissa, all these folks came in and had conversations too as moderators of these dialogues. And so we worked as a team, and right now there's over 150 of us across all of these different groups for different ethnicities, cultures, and people. And so the pushback that I got was from the forces of oppression. You know, power loves itself. It's the only thing it respects. So when you tell people who are privileged, who've been doing what they've been doing for the last 400 years, when you tell them that, hey, you've caused damage in our lives and you shouldn't be doing that, and you're socially irresponsible, and you've damaged our human rights, and you need to make a change, of course they give huge pushbacks. So I get PMs, emails that are all like death threats and insults and, you know, all those other things. So there's been massive pushback. But we are an army because, like I said, we just met recently, you and I, but I've seen your work in the community, but I feel like I've known you for 20 years. We're on the same team. We're moving together. And so what I recognize, that the people who are committed to doing the work are doing the work. And anybody else who's a naysayer, they're not interested in doing the work anyway. They're interested in sitting in their privilege and gnawing at the bones of people who are hurting.
So, how to talk?
Well, someone once told me, a mentor, and I follow this in everything that I do, is that everybody's favorite subject is themselves. And when you give, right, you got it. And when you give people who have had the narrative for 400 years an opportunity to talk about themselves and center themselves and have bias on about Black people, about, well, you know, they don't know what we know. There's this cultural security that they have, that they actually believe that they're knowledgeable about everything. They just started opening up and talking. And when I challenged them and saying, no, you know, that's racism, they said, no, you're racist. No, I'm racist because I just point out racism. So what happened is when you challenge them, they would speak even louder. And the more that you show them that they know very little about the thing that they think they know about, when they don't even know what they don't know, then they got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and repeating over and over. And they would say the most darnest of things. That you're just like,
You find people.
and it's awesome. So I use primarily social media. And the good thing about social media is okay, so let's be clear about this. You and I walk down the street, most Black people have experienced this. When I walk by people, they're clutching at their purse, so they're petrified of us. So they're not gonna say things to me, 6'3", they think Rasta, I'm half a dread of anything. I walk down the street and have a conversation with me, they're not gonna be frank with me because they're frightened. They don't know our culture, they don't know our people, and they've stereotyped it in their mind. But with social media, they'll say the darndest of things. They will say they'll hide behind profiles that aren't their own, with faces of like stuff like from record albums and silly video games, and they'll say the darndest of things, and that's when you get the truth. That's what you get, their unadulterated vitriol towards Black lives. And I'm going to tell you straight up. I was doing this before Mayo Cheeto came in. That's number 45 down south there. Before Trump got elected, I'll just say his name. And I watched how people would get bolder and bolder. They would say things on a profile where their work is, their school is, their kids' school is, their community organizations plastered all over in their profile information. And they would say things, they would use the N-word, they would tell us to go back to Africa, they would speak over the voices of Black women, and they'd just be insulting because they were so entrenched in their privileged entitlement that they feel that they had the right to say things that are damaging to the lives of Black people.
One of the
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you very much, brother. You can always reach out to me. I'm the only interactive, I like to say this, author on Facebook. So if you reach out and ask me a question, I will get back to you. Not my team. I will get back to you within 24 hours. That's my promise. I'm here for you. I want to answer questions. I want to have a dialogue with you. Claude, thank you for buying this. I appreciate it.
And he also says that you're welcome.
Well, I'm hoping one of my friends that I work with, fair and deep, he is an NPR radio host. He's got the greatest voice I've ever heard. Like literally, it's like melted butter. But I hope that he helps with that. That would be wonderful. And maybe one of the team. But let me be clear about this again. If I haven't said this before, that the only reason this book is coming to fruition, the only reason you're seeing me here is because the efforts of Black women, both from my mother, both from showing up at crucial times in my life, and both with this work. Right now, as we're speaking, there's probably 15,000 words of moderated, protected content. And guess who's doing the work? As usual, it's Black women. So we should give them a hand. I love them. I cherish them. I admire them. They're awesome. And I work for them. Let's be clear about this. I work for them. I'm here to be of service to them because they've upheld our community. And we haven't treated them the way we need to.
All right. Share with you. We'll say whatever.
So it's a blended mix. But mostly they happen online across social media platforms, primarily in this group, because we wanted to make it we always talk about a safe space. There's no such thing. This is a brave space that we created, not a safe space. So these conversations aren't for everybody. But what we did is we asked questions. Like this week, I'll give you a great example. I came out and I'd either ask a question or I'd make a statement. This week, I made a statement. I made a couple. And I said, this week, Don Cherry is racist and anybody who supports him can unfriend me. That's what I talked about this week. Then I made another comment and I said, Colin Kaepernick has far more character than Don Cherry does. I said, I'll repeat it, Colin Kaepernick has far more character than Don Cherry. And all these people jumped up. Now that was just on my own personal page, never mind in the groups. And the feedback that I got is they proved it. See, that's the thing. Trolls, we want them. Trolls, come to us. We love trolls. Because what the trolls do, when I just asked a question or made a declaration, they could have said, no, and here's the reason why we think that he's not a racist or why we think he's got character. They did. What a lot of them came and said, well, I'm going to remove you, or called me Leroy, or called me the N-word, or sent me some ridiculous inbox. So they literally proved, and I'm going to go challenge all of your viewers today. Go look for a post about Don Cherry, and you will see who the followers of Don Cherry are, right? And those are the type of things that we had conversations about. You'll see who those people are, and you know who Don Cherry is by the company that he keeps across the board.
Not, you know,
No problem, no problem. So Don Cherry is an 88-year-old ex professional hockey coach that used to coach the Boston Bruins, and he's well known for he's got these strong opinions, very knowledgeable about hockey, knows his stuff, knows the players, and he's very much one of the core people in hockey culture. Don Cherry is known for saying xenophobic and racist things that make highlight of others. He does a lot of othering, and in a sport that, and this is professional hockey, and it's in a chapter in my book, is Hockey Racist. 98% of hockey players are white. 100% of the ownership is white. 100% of the head coaches are white. There used to be an assistant coach, Paul Gerard, last year, but he was fired. He no longer works in the industry. So most of the people that go see the games are white. So what he did is he saw a bunch of people, because he doesn't like immigrants whatsoever, but he saw a whole bunch of people at a game, and he knew it was Remembrance Day, you know, where you wear a poppy to commemorate the death of all these young people that died in the world wars. He looked at a couple of people, didn't see them wearing poppies, and said, "You people, blah 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 blah," and then started to disparage them. "You come here to our land of milk and honey, and you don't appreciate it," and went off on a rant on you people. But we all know what you people means, because he was talking about people that came here. And if he was talking about immigrants, why not Polish immigrants? Well, he doesn't know if they're immigrants or not, because how can you tell by someone's skin color if they're an immigrant? Are you an immigrant, Dr. Vibe? Am I an immigrant, Dr. Vibe? No, he was talking about brown and black people that he saw that weren't wearing a poppy. When the reality is that the vast majority of white people that were around that stadium weren't wearing a poppy. So why didn't he focus on that? Why? Because he wanted to weaponize the issue. He wanted to weaponize the issue and take the deaths of these young people and use it to draw hatred towards immigrants. And Sportsnet fired him. And he should have been. So that's what happened. But that's common. So what we would do is we make a statement, and then people just comment. And then we give our feedback, right, which is based on empirical evidence.
So in the conversation with white people journey along, probably you may have known some commonalities with the mind, with some of the. Did you have any preconceptions?
Well, I had my lived experience, and remember, I just didn't sit on my lived experience and then do confirmation bias, which is find things that would agree with me. I actually did reading, and I started talking to other people about their lived experience, and then we reason with us. I've said to people, "Can tell me why you think black on black crime is more of an issue than white on white crime, right? Tell me why you think that's a significant issue. Tell me why you don't think that the police are racist, right, when they're shooting a whole bunch of unarmed black people. Tell me why." Build an argument for me. And what happens is that they do a lot of what Trump does, which is whataboutisms. So they won't actually talk about the issue. They'll talk about something else that isn't even related to the issue. So if I want to talk about, police brutality, they'll talk about black on black crime. Like, I'm confused. Wait a second. Are police disproportionately abusive to black lives? What does the data say about that? What does our lived experience say about that? And then you're going to talk to me about what Obama did during the last election. What does that have to do with anything? So there's a lot of this sort of deflection, diversion, and these are all elements of a thing known as cognitive dissonance, where their principles are one thing, the reality is another, and because they clash, there's this tension and stress. And because they haven't learned the coping mechanisms to deal with it, it manifests in the not telling the truth, demonizing us, or diversion. Whereas Black people, we've had to live with the fact that our principles say one thing, but our realities are another, and we've learned ways to be healthy in that.
Was there anything?
I mean, yeah, there is some stuff. Like, you have to understand, because this is, we're in every country, in every continent really in the world, what happened is that people, you get to know them a little bit, and you share stuff with them, and they seem to be on point, and then all of a sudden they get mad and say something that's damaging. Imagine you create a relationship with somebody, and you've given them your time, and then all of a sudden the blue, they'll come and say something damaging. What surprised me, and it was a pleasant surprise, and what I didn't really understand until I started to do this work, was the effort that Black women place into our civil liberties. And at all different levels, from being the primary caregivers of our kids, to being supportive of us, to being there for, things like, and I'm not trying to put anybody into gender roles, but making food and listening to our stories, and being there to bail us out if we get in trouble, to be there to support us while we're going to school, to get educated themselves, and really take the whole entire world, put it on their shoulders. And so what surprised me, and what I learned, it's the depths of despair in terms of how badly Black women are treated globally. I didn't recognize that. I heard stories about Black women in the Northern Territory in Australia, and how they're living in apartheid right now. I learned from Indigenous women how right now we're sitting on the heels of the missing and murdered Indigenous women's report, where 20,000, can you believe this, Dr. Bob? 20,000 Indigenous women and Native women are missing, murdered, lost forever. That blew me away. 20,000 people are missing and murdered, Indigenous women. 60,000 Black women in the States, which include Indigenous women. So that surprised me. And then the enormity of the system, because there's some days I can't do this. There's some days when the tide is eating us all up. It's an onslaught. Because remember, here in Canada, I think we're 6% of the population, 12% in the States. And we don't own most of the mass media. So what happens is we get just, sometimes it just comes and it doesn't stop. And that the enormity of it, I didn't realize how large this is, that stepping on the throats, on the necks of Black people.
How do you are going on to racism, well, around the world? Sounds that you were
right. So what people are going to say what they're going to say, and they generally follow a repetition pattern. Let's show that out for a second. What I'm really interested in is the stories of Black women, because what I heard a story from Fatima, who's one of our moderators, and how she's living in Georgia, and how the police, this is a woman who her whole entire life has never done anything criminal or anything, and how they treated her and her family. Recently, because she spoke out against them, they just arrested her for no reason. Right? I'm hearing stories from my friend Melinda in Australia, and how Indigenous women in Australia are just being wholesale, they're just being raped and murdered. So I'm hearing these stories all over the world. I'm hearing a story from my friend Una. You may have heard that woman and her son out in Alberta. He wore a do-rag to school, and they said that that was gang culture. And his mother said, no, my son's not involved in any gang. This is what he wears to take care of his hair. And so I'm hearing stories like that. So those stories there. And then when she spoke about her community, the amount of abuse that it would have received, my goodness. So it's those stories, the lived experiences of Black women and Black people across this planet that there's some nights I went to bed sobbing because it's just sad. And some of them I can't disclose, but there's some really, really horrible things. There's women who are dying of Black women who are dying of terminal diseases simply because they just can't get some basic $5 bottle of medication worldwide. That's the state of Blackness in the world. And that, like, and they're telling you through PM. Forget the discussions for a second. They're PMing me and telling me, my child died, or I've got breast cancer and I had no education on how to detect that. I've got, you know what I mean? Rape is a worldwide culture too as well. So these are all stories that I'm hearing that I had to open my mind and heart up and recognize that I have to do something about, because up until I started to do this work, I was contributing to it. I was contributing to it by just being trashy, male, toxic person.
So input,
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of it's collateral. There's folks like Louis March, who just by seeing him go and do his work on an ongoing basis made me feel like I wasn't alone. There's some other folks like one of the first person who handles some of the business details, Farron DeBell out of Chicago. He's a Black man and he's given a lot of support. And there's other folks like Jordan, who's out in Calgary here. There's brothers and sisters here that I really respect that have dropped some knowledge. One of my mentors, Professor Gilbert Morris, out of Turks and Caicos. So there's been people that have shown up. But when I look at my chief mentors, they're folks like Professor Lillian Allen, who stepped forward, right? Sister Greenland, Sister G, who's like my mother, Sister Eunice, or Pastor Eunice Hunnigan, Pastor Nadine Clark. These are all folks who've sort of come forward and shown a great deal of love to me, and my wife, right? And my wife has been there through all this. She's watched me crying, but the brothers, there's just times when you're just there, and there's always the specter of Malcolm and Martin and Edgar and so they're there for me, right? And then when I see you do your show and you're just churning day after day after day, grinding. Like, me and you have never spoken, but we speak all the time because I see the work you're doing and putting into the community. And it's heartwarming. I know I'm not alone, because I know I could have reached out to you at any time, and we can do what we're doing now. It's amazing.
Uh, the race.
Right, because so let's just look at our own lives. What are the different elements to the standard of living? So I always like to say this, that in every area of the standard of living, there's a discernible gap between the qualities and conditions of Black and white people. So what does that mean? Racism is a system of things. And so are our lives. So what are the different systems? There's the educational system, the legal system, the civil court systems, business systems, medical systems. There's systems upon systems, and they're all interconnected. And so what we notice is that let's take a look at the voting system, for example. I went and voted not too long ago. And what they told me is I had my passport with me, which is supposed to be the boss piece of ID. And what they told me is I needed to have a utility bill or something else that proved that I lived where I lived. My passport wasn't good enough. They didn't have computers there. So you think that's a good rule because we want to make sure that no one votes twice. But they know systemically that Black people are less likely to have some of those forms on them. They just know that through empirical evidence and measurements. So they'll do a thing, and it's called voter nullification. Or they'll do redlining, which is they'll take an area and they'll divide it up and then color code it and then tell major banks or lending institutions to only give low interest loans out to those areas that are green or blue. Guess what? Who lives in the green or blue areas, right? Black people live in the red areas. That's called redlining. So all of these systems, right? And we see with Indigenous people, these things about residential schools, this idea that you take people out of their home and throw them into a place that's not in their own culture. And with me, the CAS, their policy of taking Black children and not putting them in Black homes. When the reality is, and I'm going to blow your mind here, did you know that there's at least 5 to 10 suitable Black homes for every Black child? It's just whether this government, whether these systems, the systemic racism will dismantle itself so it can find them, so it can have the political willpower to be able to go and find them. So those are some of the systems that interact with the qualities of our life that make things more difficult for Black people.
It sounds
And James Baldwin talked about in some of his literature that we don't remember there's whole entire groups of people who are no longer with us. We've been conditioned by the Disney culture that everything's going to be all right. Like it's not. Like we're going to go off happily ever after. And that's propaganda and conditioning. So we like to think things are getting better, and maybe in some ways they are, maybe in some ways they're not. But I can't tell you that when I look at Donald Trump government, when I look at the Scheer government, when I look at the Doug Ford government here in Ontario, I don't think things have gotten better. Right? I think that what they're doing is hearing now. So if you for 400 years had unchecked power, unchecked privilege, and you had the sense of entitlement, any question or opposition to that entitlement would feel like oppression to you. And that's what we're seeing right now.
What are some, based on these conversations that are featuring, what are some misconceptions when it comes to
racism? Very first thing that the very first thing is they don't know what the definition of racism is. They don't know who can be racist, who can't. Most importantly, the lesson that they have to learn is they don't define it. They don't experience it. They may experience, and let me be clear about this, racism is over here, bias, bigotry, prejudice, and discrimination are over here. They're all individual words, specific words meaning specific things. Do not conflate them with each other. They're not synonyms for each other. Synonyms. They are not the same word. And that's something that commonly white people mix up, is they don't understand the nature of racism. We define it because we experience it. They may, don't get me wrong, they may go through, when you look at what happened to Jewish folks in World War II and how they were horribly slaughtered and treated like human garbage. It was horrible what happened to them. They went through that. But going through struggles doesn't mean that you don't have privilege and that you're not oppressing other people. And so we have to understand that racism is something specific that happened primarily to Black people and Indigenous people. And they can experience bias, prejudice, bigotry, and discrimination. Those all horrible things. They can go through, look at the Irish. The Irish were not slaves. That's a big myth too as well. And about 60 Irish historians, starting off with Liam Hogan, has come out and said very clearly, no, we at no point in time in our history were slaves. They were indentured servants, which is horrible. So it's not oppression Olympics. We can recognize the oppression of other people without trying to minimize our own. And that's what happens, is that they use that as a way to silence us and make us think things like what we went through wasn't horrible. The Irish went through it too. No, they didn't. They went through what they went through, and that was horrible. But they didn't go through what we went through.
Why? I
Well, it's an ongoing system because it never stopped. There's never a point in time when someone said, okay, free the slaves, and now we're all free, and racism's over, and yeah, I'm singing the jet, yay, boom, boom. What was that song? Song of the song, zippity doo dah, zippity yay, I'm free. Oh, that last, I'm free. No, that never. That's the pornography that we hear from Disney. The reality is that slavery, which was never abolished in North America because we still enslave people, but they're in prisons, because prison is enslavement. It's in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution in some of our articles here, right? That slavery is not allowed unless in the case of imprisonment. But then we went from slavery, and there was slavery in Canada. We went from slavery to Reconstruction, to peonage and Jim Crow, to segregation, to mass incarceration, where we are now. So if someone's going to ask me, why is it still here today? It's because it benefits those that have privilege. It benefits people who are controlling police departments. It benefits people who are giving free tax. I just read the other day that Amazon made, what was it, like 11 or 12 billion dollars and paid zero in taxes. How much of that profit money do you think actually went to the lives and welfare of Black people? Right? And so the reason why these systems still continue is because they still benefit really rich people, and the really rich people say, here you go, Irish, we're going to make you the caregivers of the police departments. We're going to give you a little bit of privilege. Not as much as the Black, or not as, we're not going to give the Black people as much as we give you, but you're still going to have this privilege. But here's what you got to do. You've got to go into Black communities and bust heads. You've got to go and you've got to fight. You've got to go, and it's not even the overt racist. It's Dr. King wrote in his letter from a Birmingham jail that his big issue was with the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. It was with liberal white people who speak over Black voices and think that they know more about the cause for Black liberation than Black people do.
Racism.
Right, and let's make a point here, because I'm going to be honest with you, every single civil rights movement that you see in North America in the last 100 years is a result of women's efforts. This whole thing about voting and the suffragette movement is really about Black women were fighting and came up with the tactics in order to fight against that. And then white women came and sold that for their own purposes. And then we even see just recently the stuff around Black Lives Matter and how, other white women have co-opted the work and efforts of Black women. It's really, all this stuff has been Black women's innovations and everybody else's capitalization while they're sitting back and still having their lives damaged. And so it really is a story of civil rights. I'm sorry, Martin. I'm sorry, Malcolm. But it's really like Ella and those folks who supported the Black church in North America here. It was like you go into church even today, who's doing 90% of the work? 99% of the work, it's black women. And these civil rights, all of the logistics were done by black women, most of them. The Black Panthers, this is the story of Fred Hampton and Bobby Seale and Huey. It's a story of Angela Davis and all those women who were working, because most of what the Black Panthers did was education and teaching people stuff and making sure there's food programs and employment programs. And that's what they did. And even like if you're looking at stuff what Malcolm did, most of the work were done by the sisters in the Nation of Islam, right? So when you look across the board, it's always been black women who are doing 90% of the work, and us black men coming in going, hey, listen to me. We have a role. Makes me feel like I need to do better. So for me on a daily basis, because I've done a lot of trashy things in the lives of women before, so I need to do better. I need to first take accountability of my poor behavior, work with people in my community so I can do better, whether it means I need to go to therapy, whether I need to go to church, whether I meditate, build an accountability circle, so when I'm acting out, I have people who are going to tell me how I'm being trashy in the lives of women. And for much of my life, I wasn't any better at it than anybody else. I'm just right now a messenger, and I'm probably the worst messenger because I'm a person who didn't follow most of these things most of his life, right? But so my role is to do better, because healthy, supported, cared for black women in this community will make us stronger, right? I can support you better as a brother if I'm supporting my whole entire community, and I'm removing the trash, the insecurity, the narcissism in my own life, so I can be better for everybody. It just makes me a better person. That's it. I have to own it. Own it, and you can have some control over it. If you don't, then you're just chasing, no, not me, not all men, blah, blah, blah. No, come on, man. Brother, come on. Just own it. Just own it.
The Sesame Street is trash.
Okay,
No one's safe, and on Sesame Street is trash.
so people always
Talk
say,
to me about
you're talking about Sesame Street, Star Trek, talk about Star Wars, the Avengers. These are just movies. Leave them alone. No, this is where it starts. What they do is they take your children in the primary socialization and they start sending them messages. Like, for example, we have Oscar, right? And people always say, well, why is Oscar so mean? Because he's a person of color and he's living in a trash can. It's Chappelle said it. I'm stealing the stuff. But when we look around Sesame Street, and I want you to start taking a look, why is it all the people with these extravagant, odd personalities, different type of personalities, all people of colors? Snuffleupagus, heroin addict. Oh, I don't know, Big Bird, what's going on? Big Bird clearly has some sort of ASD. And then the only two Muppets that we exalt are the two people that actually gentrified the whole neighborhood, that live up in a nice, beautiful apartment while everybody's living in a cave in the mountains, Snuffleupagus, a dirty nest, Big Bird, and a dirty, stinking, filth-encrusted trash can, while Bert and Ernie have enough space for everybody up there. All right? So when we look at these things, it's not about, okay, maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe people let their children like Emma just run around the neighborhood with no parental figures around. Maybe that's what they did, right? I don't know. We're hearing some stuff about his mother now is a drug addict, right? Wonderful. Another person of color that you've stereotyped. The point here is have some critical analysis over things that you're watching on TV. You can still enjoy them, but have some watch what you're putting into your brain. Pay attention, right? You watch the Avengers and you see this mythology that white people are superhuman white saviors of the universe. You've got, with Miss Marvel, shining white super savior Jesus woman who comes down glowing, that just got her powers just from by mistake because she's entitled to it, right? And this sets for what happens with black children is they watch this stuff and they see the entitlement, and then they see us pictured as drug dealers and rappers, and I'm not saying we are, or as athletes and there to entertain people, negative imagery, and then we start thinking about ourselves in a negative light. And then that has an effect on the choices that we made, so that we end up selling dope or using dope or misusing women rather than going to read a book with an X on it. Well, it's a blanket covering the whole entire planet. So it's not just here in North America. In 1884, there's this thing called the Berlin Conference. And what they did in 1884 is the Africa that you see today with all those boundaries and stuff like that, that's when they carved it up. That's when the English, the British, the Dutch, the region, Norway, Russia, everybody divided Africa up, including the US. Okay, they were involved in that. And so what we see that is prevalent then, because it's about the pillaging of resources worldwide, and it's still about that today. All right. So when I see it, I don't see things changing. I still see my brothers and sisters struggling all over the planet for just the own land that they live in and their own bodies. If you were to look in this country right now, look at how Canada let's look at water rights with Indigenous people here in Canada. Clean drinking water in Flint, Michigan. There's other places in Canada that have worse water than Flint. And things aren't going to get better with global warming. Who do you think is going to be damaged by global warming? It's not going to be people living in the 50th floor in a luxury penthouse. It's going to be people around coastal areas, which are Black, brown, Indigenous people. It's us that's going to be damaged by that. Right? And so when you see Trump or other folks back off of things like the Paris Accord, that we're looking at limiting climate change and carbon emissions, that's really about them deciding not to make decisions that are going to cost them money now in order for them to have more money now, but are going to cause the death of Black people later. So you're asking me, my big answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't really, we're into a worldwide, like we already know, like who doesn't know this other than Cheeto in the South, that global warming is a real thing. And what do you think is going to happen? People are going to die. Their quality, their standard of living is going to lower. We're in a world, we are in the tails, we are right on the onset of a worldwide crisis that has been going on for the last 400 years.
Platform thing. Yeah, I am book, no matter what, to love people.
Of course they can, because they've got privilege, of course, and they're enjoying it. You can see it when people question Don Cherry, or when people say the things to them like, well, you have privilege. When they deny it, of course they can see it. So they can see it, they see it on a daily basis, because racism, I don't care if someone was to turn around and use the N-word. I get it. Don't ever do it, because you can get some problems, right? But I'm more concerned with the systemic stuff. So if you see that you are sitting in some privileges that other people don't have in the world, of course you know that. You see other people suffering. You hear the stories for the last 400 years. How could you, as a white person or white passing person, be deaf to the screams and cries of the last 400 years? We begged you not to take us from the land. We screamed and pleaded you for not to take our children. We implored you not to mangle and whip our bodies. We begged you for a couple moments of cold water and a rest. We marched and eloquently asked you to stop oppressing us. We even took a knee, and you had an issue with us. So this is stuff you know, you just conveniently have stopped thinking about it, because you don't have to. You don't have to. Right. I mean, that I think it's obvious to anybody that Dr. Blasey Ford went through a horrible set of. She went through a horrible amount of abuse at the hands of of this guy. I don't want to mention. I didn't want to mention. Yeah. Okay. Great. So she went through tons and tons of abuse from him. She went through tons of abuse on how the community reacted to her, called her names, called her all these other things. So did Anita Hill. And you know, it's interesting. We were talking earlier about how Black women fight for civil rights, but they're never supported. Here's a shining example. Here's Anita Hill, who's being called a liar, who's being called a whole bunch of other names, and she stood up there and said, "No, he did something wrong." Right? He damaged my human rights. Right? And if she was a white woman, this would never happen, and Clarence Hill would have never been voted in. They would have strung him up, and I mean that, because we have Emmett Till and a whole bunch of other people who, you know, in the case of Emmett Till didn't do anything wrong, but Clarence Thomas did, and I believe Anita Hill, and I believe Dr. Blasey Ford, because women deserve to be believed. So when we look at Anita Hill, Professor Hill, I'm not on a first base name basis with this wonderful, educated, dynamic woman. She was treated like garbage, and she wouldn't have been if she was as much as if she was a white woman. She wouldn't have had the support of all these other white women, because they didn't do jack for Anita Hill when she was going through this.
Do you have is to the end of the tunnel?
I see people who are doing work. So all I know is I wake up in the morning, and it's before I even go to the washroom sometimes, I'm on my phone doing work. And it's the last thing I'll do before I go to bed. So I'm optimistic, but not really. I'm just doing the work because it needs to be done. Like to stop is to basically go into that good night, right? To go into that undiscovered country. And so my hope is, when I see you, Dr. Vibe, when I see folks like Dee Delgado, when I see folks like Caligula doing her work, and I see Fatima doing her work, when I see Annalisa doing her work, when I see Sasha doing this work, right? When I see Kylie doing this work, every single day when I see them getting up, that's my hope. My hope is on the people who are doing the work. And then when I see folks like BLM, Black Lives Matter, they're doing the work. When I see Black women every single day, and this is what they bring to me, and I'm appreciative. Thank you, Black women, because just seeing you hoist upon your shoulders this whole entire planet, that gives me hope. That gives me hope.
As this book taught,
Well, this book has taught me I have value. This has been a great experience. It's taught me I'm not alone. It's taught me that I have responsibilities to my community I wasn't falling for. Like, I messed up as a father. I was involved in drinking, partying, drugs, crime. I was a horrible father. I admit that. I own it, right? But it's not too late for others. It's put on me a responsibility of service to my community. That's what this work has done, right? It's corrected my thinking so that I'm focused on stopping the suffering for Black people and marginalized people worldwide. It's given me my identity. This is who I am. That little boy that grew up in that pit of a town, Newmarket, Ontario, where he was raped, beaten, told he was absolutely worthless and that would never amount to anything, that was told that I couldn't even read, I wouldn't even be able to read a book, never mind write one. I win. right? We win. And in itself, that felt good. That's felt amazing. Is that I define who I am. I set the narrative for my life. And that's of a person who's trying to help his community as best as I can. Well, I think there's a lot of white people who are working. So this doesn't work unless, like, for example, when we put this book together, we decided to raise $10,000 to get it published, right? And there's some large publishers that are stepping up right now. We're going to work with them, but we're going to write it. We're not waiting for anybody. We're going to write it. And so a lot of white people stepped up and did the stuff that they're going to do, in this area, and this is, you don't get credit for doing stuff that you should be doing anyway. You broke it, you fix it. You've got the benefit and privilege, so this is what you should be doing anyway. But when I look at folks like Allie Garrison, and I'll say their names, Aaron DeCoste, Alice Ritchie, Maria Victoria, Tara Chartrand, and some of these folks aren't all white, they're also Native too. So it's really a collection of Black, Indigenous, women of color, people of color too as well, and some brothers who definitely stepped up there and had my back the whole entire way. And so there are some people in this community, white people who are doing this in this community. Racism is a spectrum from just having a little bit to having a lot. And so you have to figure out where you are in that spectrum. If you just have a little bit, you can work on it. If you just have a lot, if you have a lot, you can work on it too. But everybody holds it. All men hold sexism. You, I, everybody. Is it just a little bit or is it just a lot? And it's the same with racism. It's not about good, bad, binary, or any of that other stuff. It just is what it is. And you can work on it. You can do it. You can do it. Hmm? I don't know. I might be dead. I might be dead. Like this helped me to find, I'm a person suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and all those other things. So for me, I don't even know what life would be like without this. This is what I had to do. And it's not just writing the book, because remember, the book's there. Like I have other books. I've got 2 or 3 other books that are on the go that are going to be there for spring. Black Boy, White Town, My Rules for Survival. That's the next book that's coming out. Maybe Conversations with Black People is coming out next. But it's not about, because this isn't just about writing books. We're doing things like funding programs for our work here. This is just a creation of this network. We're funding programs to educate people, to feed them, to give women, young women, education about their bodies and menstrual products and things like that. We've gotten money and removed women from abusive situations. We're doing a lot of stuff. We've got a not-for-profit that's been set up. So we're doing a lot of work. So without this, I don't have a meaning, because my meaning, Ubuntu, I'm here because we are here, all right?
Um,
Okay, well, I can start off with white people. And just own your stuff, right? Start listening, climatize yourself to Black voices, being around them, listening to them, and not taking the lead. Just be there. They're going to tell you. If you listen to them, they're going to tell you. Buy my book. Buy other books like it, right? There's a whole bunch here. There's Michael Eric Dyson, right? There's Franz Fanon, right? There's Black Like Who, right? You can get all these at a different book list on Bathurst and Bloor here in Toronto, right? Right. Read these books by Black people. Get involved. Go and volunteer your time. Give up your money. You have money. Give it to Black organizations. Sit there. Go see a therapist and talk to them about your implicit bias and your bigotry. Do the work. Do something. And then be quiet about it. Right? This isn't about centering yourself. This isn't about making you say, yes, I'm not a racist person. I marched with Dr. King. I don't care. My grandfather was an abolitionist. No, he wasn't. He was trash too. Right? Take ownership of it. Own it. And become it. Black people, just keep on surviving. Oh, okay. Well, You're going to make better policies. You're going to pressure the police. Like we just see out here in Canada, this young man in Oshawa who was smashed by the police. You're going to put pressure on the police so that they don't have this culture of control and killing, right? You're going to put pressure on them. You're going to make them feel uncomfortable. You're going to reduce their budgets. You're going to get involved. There's going to be civilian oversight, and they're going to stop that right before they make that decision, because 20 black or white people showed up at Station Central. They may even pause even a microsecond before they damage a black life. That's what you can do, and that's what will happen, right? Everything you do will have an effect. Let me say this again. Everything you do to fight racism and white supremacy and the oppression of black, indigenous, and people of color will have an effect on the lives of someone. You may not be able to measure it, but you could be saving someone's life by just having a single conversation with someone. My goodness, that's powerful.
Black.
Love yourselves. And what I mean is know who you are, know where you're from, know about the communities you live in, educate yourself, get out there and get involved. It's interesting that the same advice that I'm giving the white people, I'm giving the black people, because you're already doing it. And like, there's black people like Louis March and yourself who've been working in this community for a long time, Professor Lillian Allen, who've been doing this stuff for years. So I'm not going to lecture any of them on what they need to do, considering that I haven't really been doing all the things that I need to do. But I will tell you this, is learn how to show an element of love to people in your community. And I don't mean that to be spiritual bypassing. I mean, get out, go and support someone. Go to that Erica Edwards went out recently and did a podcast from the courthouse in Oshawa to support this brother. Go and do something like that. Go collect sandwiches for the black homeless. Go show up at a school. Donate. Get involved. Read about your black history. Understand these issues that are going on right now and make yourself do the work. That's what you need to do. Do the work. Absolutely. Absolutely. The only, like, I sort of created this network, worked with people and developed it. But one of the first things I did is I put a group of women run by black women and indigenous women over all these groups. So I'm not even the boss anymore, so to speak. Never really was. And these knowledge keepers make decisions on how this network is run. Because what I know is that it's community oversight and accountability that allow us to go forward. And that's where we're strong, when we're working together, when we're listening to each other. Like what's happening right now with you and I. Like the minute you and I spoke, we were connected, right? And Louis connected us, and Ida Sadu over at a different book list has connected us. And there's Lemoy Simmons and Janelle Spencer who are doing stuff in the communities. So all of these people, we're all connecting, we're doing the work, and it's because we're accountable to each other. Right, brother? I love that. When you work together, can I use that in one of the groups, Dr. Vaught? When you work together, that's a yes? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Family.
So here's what you can do. You can buy my book through conversationswithwhitepeople.com. You can just enter that into Amazon too as well. And you can go to Conversations with White People on Facebook. I'm easy to get a hold of, or you can look my name up, Icy Bailey, on Facebook. Again, conversationswithwhitepeople.com is my website where you can purchase the book, or you can look for it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Sparks Ingram, iTunes, wherever, or you can visit us on Facebook and take part of the conversation. If you're here listening and watching right now, I'm going to look back over the show. I'm going to see all the names that came up, and I want to see every one of your face involved in this conversation, because your voice is important. Voices are power.
I'm to live view station. Doc D live your life stronger and watching the
Thank you, Dr. Vibe.